Welcome back everyone to our second session of today's conference. I'm really pleased today that we're going to be joined by two of the best leaders in the sector who've really shown their leadership credentials during this crisis. We're going to be joined by Clare Budden, who's Chief Executive at ClwydAlyn, and by Lindsay, Cordery-Bruce, Chief Executive of the Wallich. I think Pete's presentation earlier this morning has led us really nicely to this session today. He talked a lot about leadership and the importance of leadership during this pandemic, both from ministers and civil servants, but also from those leading organisations on the ground. Those leaders who had that really can-do attitude at the start of this pandemic, who adapted their services, who made sure their staff felt supported, and importantly made sure that the thousands of people they support across Wales continue to get the housing and support that they needed. I think it's down to that leadership which means that so many people have avoided the worst impact of COVID, and I think that's something that the sector as a whole can be really proud of. So I'm delighted to hear from our first leader this morning, and that's Clare Budden, Chief Executive of ClwydAlyn Housing Association.
I'm doing that pause now just to check that people can hear and see me. So I'm just going to carry on. I'm assuming they can. I feel a bit embarrassed now by that rousing welcome from Katie. It's one of those, isn't it, where you feel like, oh, the only way's down now. But it's great to be here. I was delighted that Katie asked myself and Lindsay to come and speak to you today. And I think what I wanted to do was just maybe just to set a little bit of context, because my organisation is quite different than Lindsay's, and we've probably had some similar challenges, but some quite different ones as well. So we're a housing association, we're in North Wales, and we run a number of care and nursing homes, a lot of older person services, a lot of ordinary housing, and we've got 14 different homeless services and projects that we run as well. So quite a broad organisation. We employ trade staff as well as all of our supported living staff, nurses, and all the kind of back office services that you would expect us to have. And when the pandemic hit, God, a year ago now, we were part way through some major changes in our culture and in our ways of working. So we developed a new mission for ClwydAlyn, which is all about beating poverty and all about addressing inequalities. And we'd also introduced 3 new values around the way we work together as colleagues, and they were trust, kindness and hope. And I'll refer back to those as I talk things through, because they've been really important to us during this period. We'd started to roll out some agile working, but we weren't ahead of the game with that at all. So we did very, very quickly have to get iPads, laptops and people set up to work from home. But one of the challenges that we faced was that because of the broad range of services that we provide, we had lots of staff, most of our staff actually, where it really was just business as usual. And I think for lots of housing associations, there's been a lot of debate about how they enabled home working. And for us, we were, I guess, quite like Lindsay's organisation, where it was very much about how do we keep those critical frontline services working effectively. And we had all the challenges everybody else has had. We had challenges about PPE. We had challenges about quite a lot of staff who needed to shield, where we weren't even aware, if we're honest, of the very significant health issues that they faced, because pre-pandemic, they just got on and done their jobs and they'd not felt that they had a challenge that they needed to disclose to us. So we had staff that needed to shield. We also had quite a lot of staff with really significant childcare issues who wanted to come into work, but were just finding it physically impossible. Maybe they were a single parent, maybe they didn't have family members that were able to step in and help them. And I guess for chief execs, there's always a tendency to think about how you were going to, with your exec team, sort things out on the ground for people. But we quickly realised we weren't the best people to do that, because we just didn't know what each project needed and what was going to be the best way for people to work. So we asked our seniors in our homeless projects to work out for themselves what was going to be the best way to keep residents safe, keep staff safe, and keep continuing to deliver services. So in some projects, they introduced a totally different shift pattern, where staff felt they'd rather come into work fewer times during the week but work longer shifts, so they went to doing a 3-shift system. They felt that would expose their families to less risk, and it would mean that there was more consistency for the residents in that they'd be dealing with and working with the same person throughout the whole of a working day. There were, we really didn't want to access the furlough scheme unless we really needed to do. So those staff that needed to shield or needed to be at home or had real childcare issues, we, with their agreement, found them alternative duties in the company. And some of that's been one of the best outcomes we found, because staff have had the opportunity to try a different job, try something that they would never would have in normal circumstances have been given the chance to do. So we did have trade staff who went and worked in homeless services. We had trade staff that went and worked in care homes as housekeepers. We had people going into our extra cares to serve meals to people. And we had people doing back office services at home, where it's allowed people to think about maybe where they might like to take their career in a different direction in the future. We also negotiated with all the commissioners in our homeless services so that we could work in different ways. And what we found was that there was a lot of support within local government for us, delivering the best outcomes we could for people, but recognising we needed to work things in a very different way. So we also deployed staff to help local authorities where they were taking over university accommodation or hotels to help them to run those things. And one of the other things we found a benefit with, we've only got one domestic violence service, but we've actually found much stronger levels of engagement from those people who need to access advice and support, because we've been doing it online or over the phone or over the internet, than our previous model, which was people popping into a building and seeing people face to face. And actually what we've been able to do is to offer services at a much more convenient time of day for people to access them. So we've each team produced their own team agreement about how they were going to work, and we just asked teams to look at the outputs and outcomes that they needed to work to, and then to work amongst themselves to decide the best way to do that. So that's enabled us really to extend our working day and to extend our number of days during the week when some of our services are available, because maybe somebody did need 5 hours off in the day to do homeschooling, but they were able and prepared to do a couple of hours in the evening or a couple of hours at the weekend. So haven't had a one size fits all. We haven't had a command and control approach. We've trusted our people, and they've got on and made sure that we've continued to deliver services in ways that probably a year ago we would have thought were really impossible. It's been tricky for people like me. I'm a bit of a hands-on leader to do the right thing. So at first I was volunteering to go into what was previously our homeless night shelter or our extra cares. I wanted to get my hands dirty, and I wanted to show my staff that I was really giving them support. And Lindsay and I chatted about this the other day, and I think she's quite similar to me in this. But I did then have to have a word with myself, because actually, if I'm spending my time doing that, I'm probably not doing lots of the other things that I need to do to make sure that the company stays financially strong and that we continue to be here as a thriving organisation into the future. So in terms of some of the other leadership bits we did, we've done all the stuff everybody else has done, some of which I've really hated, like films, messages, trying to get personal messages out to people so they don't feel isolated and alone. We've also, because we're a housing association, we've been able to put some practical measures in place that I realised for some of the third sector organisations would be out of reach. So we have been able to thank staff by making a payment to those staff in our critical 24/7 services. We've been able to put a fair bit of wellbeing support in place for staff, and that's included, you know, whether that's access to Zoom mindfulness online, you know, Zoom online, covering mindfulness, covering yoga, that type of thing, access to mental health services for staff that have needed that. And we've tried to make things personal. We employ about 800 people, but we sent thank you cards out to staff on Staff Appreciation Day, which had a handwritten message in them. And we've allowed staff who've not been able to take holiday to carry holidays over, which we're going to pay them for, because in some of our services, people are going to find it a real struggle to get some of the time back that they've put in voluntarily to help keep services safe and running. And the money is important to people, so we've been able to put some measures in place to pay people. I guess my philosophy around leadership is that if you do create a great place to work and you can have a learning culture and a high trust culture, then if you get it right for your staff, they will get it right for your residents. And just before the pandemic, we'd made a decision that we were going to stop having staff disciplinaries and staff grievances, because our view, my view, is that most people come to work intending to do a good job, and things get in the way and people make mistakes sometimes. But we want to have an organisation where people feel comfortable flagging up when something's gone wrong, and that we work together with them to put things right. And pre the pandemic, the year before that, we probably had in our organisation about 20 formal grievances submitted and about a similar number of formal conduct cases. And over the last year, we've reduced that right down to nil, and nothing's really gone wrong in a service. And we believe that if we can have that kind of supportive approach to staff, then that will really help us in challenging times, and it will really help us to create a great place for people to work. We pride ourselves on employing staff with lived experiences of the service that we employ who've still got some of their own issues and challenges to manage. So we've recently agreed to become a trace-informed workplace. I don't like the phrase, but everybody in the audience will know. Trace is about trauma, and ACE is about adverse childhood experiences. So we're at the moment starting to think through what that means for us in terms of the kind of support offered to staff who work for ClwydAlyn. And we want to see that whole approach develop further in terms of the services that we provide to our tenants. So it's been a tricky year. I felt at times humbled by the commitment and dedication of the people that we employ. And I've, on that day when I've started to feel a bit sorry for myself about being stuck house for a year, I've had to have a deep word with myself to say, how dare I? I've been able to work safely, and we've been able to keep our organisation delivering great services to people, but that's only been because of absolutely brilliant people who've put themselves at risk and have put their family members at risk sometimes. So when I have that little word with myself, I feel really thankful, but I guess ultimately proud of how we've worked through things. So happy to engage in questions and discussion after we've heard from Lindsay. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Claire. That was fantastic. It was really interesting. I think particularly your comments about empowering staff to make decisions about how they should respond, and it'd be interesting to see how that goes forward in the future. But we'll come back to questions. Please do utilise the Q&A section of Hoover in order to ask any questions for Claire or Lindsay. Thanks very much, Claire. I'm now delighted to introduce Lindsay Cordery-Bruce, who's the Chief Executive of the Wallich. She's going to share her leadership reflections during a crisis.
Thank you, Kate. Morning, everyone, from me and my generous lockdown hair. At the Wallich, we have about 71 services across Wales, and we exist to do three things. So that's to get people off the streets, to keep people off the streets, and to create opportunities so that nobody goes back. So that's what we're about. Again, like Claire, I'm not sure whether I can live up to the introduction. I'm wondering whether we need widescreen to fit our heads in. And I also feel like a bit of a fraud, because very much like Claire, this, in terms of leadership, this period has been very much one of getting the hell out of the way of people who know how to do things better. So what I'm going to talk about is what that meant for my leadership, actually what it means for followership as well, because we weren't on our own in this. I'll run through some of the things that we achieved that we're particularly proud of, but I'm also not going to pretend that everything's been rosy, because it hasn't. There's been some real challenges that we've faced at the Wallich, so I'm going to come clean about some of that stuff, and then just talk about the best bits that we want to keep, because it hasn't all been bad, this pandemic. There's some real nuggets of good practice that we've seen develop, and we don't want to go back to the way it was before, because now we can do things better. So when the pandemic first hit, I embraced my inner control freak. I set up the Wallich COVID-19 task force, which I thought sounded like we all had superpowers. I was really enthusiastic about it. and I led my team quite robustly. So it was like, right, we need to do this, guys, we need to do that, we need to do that. And what I was met with was, oh, Lindsay, we've already done that. So it was like, okay, but we need to do this as well. And have you considered that? And it was like, yeah, that's all done. So it was like, good, carry on. And it was that sort of feeling of my role in this isn't to necessarily lead the plan, because there's other people in the organisation that do that a million times better and know our services inside out, while I've got my head in accounts and strategy and all that sort of stuff. So it was a case of changing my role to be the supporter of the people who support the people, and keeping them going while they orchestrated all the different strategies we had, and writing all the different hygiene protocols and all the different adaptations that we had to make. It was no mean feat. There's nearly 500 staff in the Wallich now. So just the level of communication that's had to go out, the level of orchestration to keep critical services open. I've just been blown away, like Clare, just blown away by the level of commitment. And I think very, very early in the pandemic, we didn't know how bad this was going to get. So we started making real worst case scenario plans. And what we found was that there was 105 people out of our workforce that were willing to move in to our critical services and be ill with the people that we support, if that's what it took, to keep things running and to keep things safe. You can't buy that level of commitment. Job descriptions went out the window. Everyone just did what needed to be done. And nobody said, oh, well, that's not my job. Everyone said, what can we do? How can I help? And it was just inspiring, really inspiring. So I think my key leadership lesson is know when to get out the way, and not to let our egos sort of interfere with best practice when somebody is better placed to respond to a crisis, but be there to support the people who are supporting the people. So what does this mean for followership, I guess, is the question. And I think followership it's quite an outdated term now in the leadership literature. And it kind of implies hierarchy, which is something that makes me queasy. And I don't mean it in that context, but I think it wasn't just that we led differently. I think it's that people followed differently. And we just saw much more sort of active participation and real engagement in how the strategy affects every single person that works in the Wallich and what that means for getting people safe. So what we actually did when this hit, it seems like another lifetime ago, because the pace was so fast and there was so many hours and so much effort. But we formed a task force, and that was all the people who needed to put in an emergency response, so ranging from our HR team to our comms team to our health and safety team, everybody who needed to help us to orchestrate the plan. We'd wait for Boris to do his thing, we'd wait for Mark to make his announcements, and then we'd be all in a room together saying, what does this mean for the staff at the Wallich? What does this mean for the way we run services? And our comms team were just absolute heroes. They had messaging out there before the next shift even logged on. And I just couldn't have asked for any more from them. We had risk management plans. We had to risk assess all the different types of project differently. So a floating support service had different guidance to maybe an outreach service or a residential project or a mediation service, for example. So it wasn't just the Wallich had a plan. The Wallich had multiple plans for each different service type. And then everybody pulled together to communicate that and make sure that everybody knew what that meant for them in their role. We were on the phone till midnight finding PPE, the same as everybody else was. And we wrote like really stringent hygiene protocols so that we could keep all our projects really, really clean and just really reduce the chance of COVID-19 spreading. So in terms of like what we achieved, we supported about 5,000 people in that first 3 months. Which is absolutely colossal. We also noticed an increase in younger people coming forward as a result of family breakdown as well, which was quite troubling. One of the challenges we did face, though, is that the food provision that our guys normally rely on, like through the day, they weren't open. But we just had this outpouring of support from the corporate sector in particular. So Admiral Insurance, for example, they paid for 1,300 odd dinners, and we got that distributed right across Wales to make sure that people had something to eat and could stay in if they wanted. Another major challenge that we managed to break through is we've wanted everybody in our residential facilities to have Wi-Fi access. We've talked about it for years, and for technical reasons that I don't understand, we were told we can't do this because of data security and technical reasons. But actually what we found when we really looked at it was we just had to change our settings, and we got about 400 people connected to the internet who weren't before for less than 10 grand. So that meant that the people in our projects could keep accessing services, keep in touch with family. And in some projects where we had to close communal areas, that was just pivotal. So we don't want people to be isolated. We still want them to be able to access support. I think we kept 24 critical services open. And what we saw was that the rest of the services kind of operating digitally, but staff circulating between the different projects. So, for instance, we had somebody who works on our employment engagement programmes working in the hostel in Swansea and supporting the staff there. And everyone has just mucked in and said, well, what do our service users need? And everyone's just been there like a shot. And I think what surprised me the most is our sickness levels have gone down. And that's been quite a shock. And I think that's to do with the agile way that we can work digitally. So we're assessing sort of what that means for the way we work at the Wallich, and what that means for the different roles that we have across the organisation, and how we can sort of keep that agility. I think one of the things I'm most proud of from lockdown is a project that was set up at speed in Swansea called Tea Tom Jones. It's not that Tom Jones. We don't throw pants at the Wallich. Basically what happened is Swansea Council came together with the money, Pobble came with a building, the Wallich and ClwydAlyn pulled together to offer support, and we now have self-contained units that are available, and it's since been recommissioned, and we launched that in 6 weeks. So while I was part of the Homeless Action Group, I talked quite a lot about getting the system out of its own way. T. Tom Jones is a shining example of exactly what I meant, where you say, right, we need to do this. Where's the resources? Who can help? And you just get on with it. And I think that shows that we can work differently in Wales. We can get the system out of its own way, and we can respond to need faster. As I said, it hasn't been rosy, all of it. We've had some trouble with like spice use, for example, and people knowing that there was nowhere else really to put people, and that our options were limited in terms of transferring people between projects and putting people in more intensive support projects if that's needed, for example. So that's been quite tricky to handle. We've also seen a bit of low-level antisocial behaviour, maybe more than usual, just because people are bored out their minds and they're sick to the back teeth of lockdown, and fair enough. Excuse me. We've seen a few sort of quality issues as well, where our offices aren't big enough for staff to social distance. So you can only have a certain number of staff on, but then other risks increase because you haven't got such a staff presence. So it's difficult as leaders, I think, to choose which risk we want to manage. So that's something that's taken a lot of focus and a lot of discussion across the leadership team. I think working at home isn't all it's cracked up to be. I think certainly as a leader, and I reflected on this recently with my director team, so I've got a brand new director team at the Wallich as well, and we found that we were feeling sort of guilt and shame about working at home because our guys are on the front line and all of this stuff. And if I was needed on the front line and they called me, I'd do a shift, no problem at all, wouldn't even think about it, I'd be straight there. But I think what staff are feeling when they work at home is because nobody can see what they're doing, that everybody must think that they're skiving. And to be honest, we don't have trust issues with our staff at the Wallich. I think if I actually looked at it, I'd probably just find that I owed them time. And what we found as well is that some people don't even have a table at home because they might be in quite a small place. So I think it's safe to say the novelty of working at home has worn off. I find it quite hard to run some of my Zoom meetings with 3 dogs in the room, who I'm really surprised haven't joined in. They're very passionate about the cause of the Wallich. So there's some of like the bad bits, I guess, and the stuff that isn't all rosy, because I think there's a temptation to go, look what we did, everything's fantastic, but actually that's not a true reflection. We did do some fantastic things, but we've also had some real tricky situations that we've had to manage, and my staff have been amazing in dealing with that. So my last point is about sort of how we keep the best bits. COVID-19 has had lessons for us. I'd totally reiterate Pete's point about the outstanding leadership that we've seen from Welsh Government and from local authorities. Previously, I've described homelessness as a crisis of leadership because it never quite felt like anyone was in charge. I think during COVID-19, that fell to the wayside and we saw people come into their own. I'm running out of voice. I think as a community, we saw a reduction in otherness. We know that people see the homeless community or communities as something very separate from themselves. It's like, we're the normal people, they're the homeless communities over there. And all of a sudden we've had something that made us the same. All of a sudden we're all in it together, at risk, and we all have a responsibility to manage the risks to each other. So I think the public perception took a bit of a shift, and I think we need to carry on the momentum of that. Just for a minute, the people that we support were as important as everybody else. And I think we've seen that in various other commitments, like having access to the vaccine, for example, and special thanks to Cymorth for everything that they did to campaign for that. We need to keep that going. We need to increase our ambition for the people we support. And I think those lessons from COVID-19 we can take forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. And I have to say a big thank you to Lindsay and her team as well, because, you know, 1 year ago yesterday, when we were stuck in a room at Cymorth trying to work out what on earth we were going to do as the pandemic was approaching, and we knew that people experiencing homelessness were at huge risk, Lindsay made available one of her senior leaders within her organisation to come and take part in that discussion. And, you know, I can wholeheartedly say that the guidance was enhanced by Sian's contribution. So there's something about leading within your own organisations, but also helping to support the leadership more broadly. And I know that both of you have done that with your contributions to the Homelessness Action Group, and we're all very grateful for that. I think there were some key themes that came out of that. I think the value base of the organisation came out really strongly from both of you. The values that existed within the organisation before the pandemic hit meant that you had a more solid foundation to build on, and those of compassion, empowering staff elsewhere in the organisation. I think it's always, you know, very easy in a crisis as the leader to be like, okay, I'm in charge, this needs to happen. I think hearing about how you empowered your staff was fantastic. I think your openness to learn and reflect, really, really important, and communication throughout the organisation. I think my reflections, you know, of the leadership that has been demonstrated by the sector, you know, Lindsay touched on this, but at all levels really. And we've heard a few times over the past couple of days, the leadership from the Minister, the very clear messages that she put out very, very early in the pandemic. And of course, the £10 million that at the time compared to 3.5 million in England. And when you think about the size of the countries, you know, that really does make that statement really clear. I think the Minister saying that it wasn't just accommodation, it was also support, and it was multi-agency support, and that it absolutely included people with no recourse to public funds, and we'll touch on that later today. You know, the letters that she then wrote to local authorities setting out the plans to kind of, you know, put priority need and vulnerability to one side, to say, you know what, everyone's vulnerable in this crisis, and we've got a duty to support everyone. And then of course that reflection of, you know, what we needed to do next. So not just staying in crisis mode, but thinking about that phase 2 transformation, and the messages that she shared with the conference yesterday about not going back. From my perspective, and I guess this is some of the stuff that most people won't witness, but I think the leadership from civil servants during this in the Housing Directorate has been exceptional. You know, I remember at the very start in February, when I first raised concerns in February 2020, to civil servants. They listened, they took it seriously, they asked for scenarios and took those back to the kind of central planning within Welsh Government. And ever since that, I know Emma Williams, who's Director of Housing and Regeneration, made sure that civil servants from other parts of the Housing Directorate were reallocated to focus on the homelessness. She understood the risks there and made sure that the resource was there to support that response. I know that the collaboration that they have demonstrated has been exceptional. And part of that leadership, as you've both highlighted, is about knowing when to bring other people in to help coordinate that response and get the expertise from a wide range of people. And ever since that day in February, the Welsh Government have involved us and other key stakeholders every step of the way, from texts at the weekend, what's your latest intelligence on this, to can you help us write this guidance? We've got a very short turnaround, but we'd really value your input. Or can you touch base with some key people in the sector and let us know what's happening on the ground so that we can then respond? And I think the issues that we collected and raised with Welsh Government during certainly the first 6 months, they absolutely put front and centre of the prioritisation of their workload. And so, certainly those civil servants leading the Housing and Regeneration Directorate and the Housing Policy team and the Homelessness team have been absolutely critical and worked alongside us, and showed real leadership, I think. And we've touched upon, I think, Pete in his presentation about how homelessness and housing support staff maybe weren't viewed as critical. People weren't aware of the work that they did before this pandemic. And I think that internally in Welsh Government, the housing civil servants have absolutely raised the profile and made sure that regardless of what conversations they're having in social services or public health, they're continuing to champion this part of the sector. I think Lindsay and Clare both quite rightly touched on local authorities, and I think the coordination and collaboration that's been led by some local authority leaders has been exceptional, very quickly bringing people together before guidance was even out there in many cases. We heard from Pete earlier today, who said, Cardiff booking the hotels before they had I think they knew the funding was likely to come, but they didn't have that concrete letter, but they knew something had to be done, and they went ahead and they took, risks with certain insurance liabilities because they knew that they needed to get people inside and get them the support that they needed. But again, using that expertise across the sector, taking a collaborative approach, showing that leadership. And I think we've got to recognise the leadership challenges that local authorities will have as we come out of this pandemic. The minister's talked about not going back to where we were, but that's going to be really challenging, and not least for our local authority partners. And I think we've all got to work collaboratively to support them through that. And last but not least, the sector, third sector support providers and housing associations, that can-do attitude, adapting services so quickly, decision making in a crisis, providing support to staff to get through this really, really difficult period. I think, the leadership that we've heard from both Clare and Lindsay today absolutely demonstrates that, and how important that's been in helping, your services and your staff to keep delivering that vital support. So we've got the Q&A open for any questions, and we've got a few in already. Is there anything at all that you wished you'd done or wished you hadn't done during this crisis? Tough question, I know.
That's really difficult. I think I wish we'd had more activities and things for people to do and had that prepared before. Because it's been really boring for people. It's been really, really boring, and our staff have had a bit of a nightmare trying to help people stay in who don't really want to stay in. So that's been very, very difficult to manage. So I wish we'd have been sort of better prepared, but I guess none of us saw it coming to this extent. So that's probably something that we would do differently, and just enhancing people's digital skills. It would be nice that the people we support were less digitally excluded before this, so that they could participate fully rather than having to do it in a rush. That's what I think.
Absolutely. Thanks. Clare?
Yeah, I think I wish we'd been buying PPE beforehand, because the guidance changed, didn't it? And we were in that difficult position of wanting to do the best we could for our staff and just not having enough stuff there at first. We didn't, let's be honest. I also wish we'd known a lot more about all the people that work for us and what they like to do in the spare time and what they're good at, because we kind of found some things out by chance, you know, people saying, oh, I don't mind going into the night shelter and cooking lunch for everyone. It's like, oh, right, I didn't know you could do that type of thing. So I think, you know, you kind of just wish you'd known some of those things before, because you could have been using them before. You didn't need a crisis just to know that you had somebody in your services that was brilliant at, I don't know, knitting. You know, people, because Lindsay's point about people being bored, if you knew the stuff that people could do and were interested in doing, we could have made much better use of it. And I think it was also, maybe I say, just a bit like we've both covered, holding yourself back, you know, that kind of innate desire to show people you're in it with them, and isn't the right thing to do necessarily. So I think a couple of things like that really for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that you know, that's something that we've reflected on at Cymorth as well, because you know, we were seeing all of our members doing this incredible work on the ground, you know, life-saving, life-changing sort of services, and you know, we're stuck working from home, and you just have to think, you know, what is my role, what is my contribution? And that isn't necessarily going out and volunteering and delivering a service. It's about providing that leadership and that representation, so that the decision making and strategy and policy is creating the right framework for people on the ground to get on and do what they need to do. But it's really, really challenging, and yeah, absolutely agree. What leadership qualities have you seen in other people around you, both people inside your organisation, not necessarily people necessarily in leadership positions, it could be anyone really that has showed that leadership qualities, but also in other organisations that you've maybe worked alongside during this crisis?
Do you want to go, Lindsay, or me?
Yeah, I'll go then if you like. Yeah, I think for me what was significant is seeing my director team just absolutely come into their own. So we've appointed 4 new directors at the Wallich, and most of them have been with us 10 years plus anyway. So I think what this pandemic did was sort of mark a line in the sand between what they used to do and what they do now. And it really focused their induction, and it focused the mind very much on what leadership means rather than management. So just watching those guys grow, I think, was amazing. And I think what we haven't acknowledged is the leadership that service users have shown as well. We've had some facilities that have been really tricky and challenging to manage. We've seen some right behaviour, but we've also seen communities come together, and we've seen people in lockdown together, like decorating the place and checking on the staff and giving each other mutual support. So I think that the people we support have led through this as well, and we've got to acknowledge that they've been awesome. They really have. Things could have gone much worse, but they've pulled together and helped where they could, and just been part of the team.
Yeah, I think as well, some of the stuff for me has been about, I guess it's that stuff between the difference between sort of leadership and management. And actually what I think I found is that peer pressure can work a treat with people sometimes. So, you know, the person who was saying they couldn't come into work, they needed to shield because they had asthma, but actually they didn't really have severe asthma. It was the peer pressure from people in their team that got that person to come back into work. And that I think in the past, you know, because of the way lots of our organisations are structured, we kind of think, don't we, that, you know, guidance comes from here to here to here to here. And I think one of the things that's been a real eye-opener for me is we've had a lot of tiers in our supported living services of management, but the people that really came into their own were the seniors in the projects, because they knew the residents, they knew their team really well, they knew we'd have difficulties getting into work. And actually one of the things we haven't said about today is some people were just afraid to come into work. You know, some people, it wasn't that they had an ill health issue, they didn't have a childcare issue, they didn't have a homeschooling or an elderly mother to look after, but excuse my language, they were just shit scared about coming in and catching it. But I wouldn't have known that. So I think for me, it's been just allowing people to get on and do, but them knowing that if they need some help and advice, there is somebody that they can talk to. And it might not be somebody in a line management structure, it might be somebody in the next project down the road who's better placed to give some kind of leadership advice.
I guess one of the benefits of the digital work that organisations have been doing is that the people in different projects are connecting in ways that they maybe didn't do before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess, you know, it's that kind of team leader or middle management kind of position, which I think, certainly having worked for a support provider in the past, it often feels like those are the people that are squeezed from both directions. You know, they have the issues that are raised by frontline staff kind of pushed up to them, and then the senior management and leadership saying, right, we need to implement this approach, and they're often squeezed in the middle. And actually it sounds like those were the people who really came into their own in many ways, and actually, you know, what can we do to better recognise and support them in that very difficult kind of middle management position?
Yeah, I think risk taking as well was, you know, particularly with local authorities. I think we, because we work across, we're not as widespread as Lindsay's organisation, but we're across 7 local authorities, and God, they've all responded differently. Some have taken more risks, some have put more trust in providers, some have come and asked for help, some have just said, this is what we're doing, can you help us with it? So I think we've all needed to be flexible in our approach, and I think just never forget that what we're here for, that's the most important thing, what we're here for. And the way we have to work behind the scenes to do that can be different in different places depending on what's needed.
Yeah, for us, it's really made us question sort of our approach to regionalisation, because the way the structure of the Wallich is set up, it's very regional. When actually what we are digitally is just one big awesome Wales-wide team. So we're really questioning what that means for our leadership and our structure going forward. I mean, we've had one of our senior managers joining us from Aberystwyth all the time anyway, because that's where he lives, but it gives us much more opportunity to be genuinely Wales-wide rather than concentrating on the bigger cities and then poor North Wales feeling like the poor relation as happens sometimes. So we've been working really hard to address those things, and to make sure that there's equity in the way that our central functions serve all of Wales, not just the ones that are kind of closest and can pop in.
Both of you have reflected a little bit on the impact on staff, both of, for those who continue to be frontline, the fear that they experienced, the anxieties, particularly at the start when there was lots unknown about the virus and maybe you know, less access to PPE, etc., but people still had to keep delivering services. But then also the experiences of those who've worked from home, and actually it's a very different experience, but still been really stressful and disconcerting, because, you know, I guess particularly where you're delivering homelessness and support services, you're continuing to hear that trauma from the stories that people are sharing with you, but you're doing so in a room in your house without any of the rest of your team to kind of say, God, that was a heavy call. Can we have a chat? Can we have a cuppa about it? And, you know, I think one of you mentioned that feeling of guilt of working from home and not being there on the front line. So, you know, I think both sets of staff experience huge challenges, but in very different ways. How have you, as leaders in your organisation, sought to kind of support those groups of staff and try and help them through the past year?
We invested in a new sort of staff support package called LifeWorks, where there's access to counselling and a whole load of wellbeing resources through an app, or you can talk to somebody over the phone or digitally if that's where you want to go. We've also increased our provision for reflective practice sessions and one-to-one sessions with our support provider Kinby, there who we do all our PI work with. And it's been really well received and really well taken up. But I think it's been about setting boundaries differently, because yes, we've got the guys who are flogging it on the front line, but actually we've got the guys who are working at home, that they're not working at home, they're living at work, and just trying to make up for their guilt by just working unacceptable hours because they feel like they've got it easier than their colleagues, when actually if they're not okay, they can't really help anybody. So it's trying to emphasise that we need daylight breaks. If you have to take a 2-hour lunch and work on later so you get some daylight during the winter months, things like that. Working around people's childcare times. Mine are teenagers now, but they're still every 5 minutes popping in going, watch me do this, look at that. Or am IT support for a school lesson or something like that. It's been really tricky. I mean, one of my staff is having to plan her work in 20-minute windows because that's the attention span of their 4-year-old. That's not easy at all.
Similar to Lindsay in a sense. I don't think I've got much to add to everything she said. I think what we've really understood is you know, the bit about supporting somebody who's experiencing domestic violence while maybe your 4-year-old's running in the room. So some of the real challenges staff have had isn't just about the loneliness and isolation, it's the fact that the environment they're working in actually is not appropriate for the kind of job that they're trying to deliver. So we've, you know, I think if we're going to keep with a lot of staff working from home into the future, we have to think about what more we can do to help staff around some of that. So we have reflective practice now. We've put in place, you know, if there's been a really tricky incident, groups of people coming together just to kind of problem solve, support, see what we could do in terms of changing the way we work for the future. But some of the stuff staff have to deal with are really, really difficult, aren't they? And they're not things that, you know, for the staff in the projects that you can just neatly put in a box when you come home in the evening. So I certainly think for us, we've got more to do, and I'd appreciate some more dialogue within the sector with the likes of yourselves about what more we can do to make sure that our staff do get the break they need, they do get the access to the relevant support at the relevant time, the right opportunity to download when they've just been on their own. And, you know, I hear some things third hand and I can't sleep at night. I haven't been in the project. So I do think that moving forward, I'd really appreciate some more dialogue across Wales about whether we're doing as much as we could, whether we need to be doing some things different to make sure that our staff, you know, and if we employ staff with lived experience, some of the trauma they see at work brings back the traumas they've suffered themselves as well. So, you know, I'm not sure in ClwydAlyn we're getting all of that right at the moment. I think we need to do more.
Yeah, I don't think that anyone in the sector is getting it all right, and I think there's a real opportunity to share some of the reflections and learning. We had a really good session yesterday lunchtime with one of our PI trainers and frontline staff speaking about the impact of the pandemic on you know, how they've been operating, and the importance of reflective practice was a really key thing for people to be able to download and learn, but also the environment that you create through reflective practice, which is open, which is not about you know, disciplining people and criticising people when things have gone wrong, but using it as a learning and a sharing opportunity to reflect on what could be done differently. And we're certainly very open and happy to take this forward. And I think, you know, we've got psychologically informed approaches embedded within the Homelessness Action Group report. We've got it in the Housing Support Grant guidance. And, you know, what we need to see, I think, is services commissioned in a way that enables the time and space and funding for that support to be put in. Otherwise, you will see that disparity between organisations that can and cannot afford to put those things in place. And, you know, it's no good commissioning services which only pay for the hours of support delivered. You need to be able to commission services where staff have the confidence and the time to take that time out for reflective practice, where you can pay for clinical supervision where that trauma is present and needed, and we're not relying on organisations to search into their reserves or simply turn around and say we don't have the resources to do that. We need to create that equitable playing field for that to happen. And we're really happy as Cymorth to support those continued conversations, as it's definitely a priority for us. And I think something that, you know, we've emphasised to Welsh Government certainly and local authorities in the WLGA in terms of the extra 40 million going into the housing support grant, while it's, you know, people are keen to commission lots more services to meet the needs. It's also about investing in current services who've not received an uplift for the past decade, making sure that we use some of that money to provide uplifts for staff and pay, and also to provide that psychologically informed support as well. Another question. So there's been lots of learning through this pandemic. There's been lots of things which, you know, you've both voiced that you want to continue into the future. How are your organisations and you as leaders and your leadership teams going to try and capture all of that stuff and make sure that you don't lose any of it as we move out of this pandemic, and make sure that we don't lose some of that great practice, and that we try and mainstream some of those great things into our future practice?
We've
go on, Claire.
No, you go, Lindsay.
There's multiple approaches that we've taken. So as part of our COVID-19 strategy, we have a restoration plan, which is about what needs to happen for services to return to normal. And that includes like a full review period of everything that happened, and to capture all the learning and possibly share it with the sector, and hope that others do the same, because like you said, nobody's got it all right. There's lessons in this for all of us. the other thing that we're looking at is sort of consulting with staff about how their roles actually work, and doing sort of an analysis on what office space we need and how we need to work and all of that kind of thing, because I don't think we need to be based in an ugly church with everybody on separate floors, all in different departments, when actually we can come together better digitally. So it doesn't mean that we're not going to have offices, of course we are, but it means that we're going to keep the communication going. I mean, my senior leadership team now, we're having sort of mini SLT meetings twice a week, whereas before it was like, stick it on the agenda, we do it all every month on a Tuesday morning. It doesn't have to work like that, because the agility and the speed of decision making is just so much slicker. And then the communications that come from that for the teams, it's just been really, really valuable. So we're totally dedicated to keeping that.
I have to stop going after Lindsay because she says all the best points.
Ah.
I suppose the only bits I would add to maybe what Lindsay said. So we've done a kind of lessons learned, and we've got a whole load of things that we want to, I guess, embed. But we were in the middle of starting to do a full review of our staff terms and conditions when the pandemic struck. And we'd started out initially, like everybody does, a lot of people do, with looking at what best practice is. And actually what we did was we put a big pause on that and said, let's find out the way we want to work as an organisation. Let's agree the relationships we want to have with each other. Let's understand what we need to do for our staff to feel valued and that it's a great place to work. And then let's write a set of T's and C's that give us that. So that's where we've got to, and we've got them going to the board next week. So there's a whole load of stuff in there about flexibilities. Staff have developed a whole new set of stuff around trust, connected to things like death in the family. We're extending maternity and paternity, you know, all that. So it's come from staff saying, this is what we want and this is the way we need to work. I think the other thing that's a big lessons learned for me for the future as well is around our care services. So the homeless sector's strong in Wales, so we can get a collective voice together, whether it's through Cymorth or whether it's through some of the other bodies that bring us all together. But I feel from a care perspective that the fragmentation of provision from not-for-profits like us, the for-profit sector and the council sector, because we're also fragmented, the governments, and I say that across the whole of the UK, got away with not having proper PPE in place for care homes, not having robust testing in place for care homes. So one of the things for me that's a real near to the top of my to-do list at the moment is to work with others to see how we can get a much stronger collective voice around our care services for younger and older people, because we have to get a stronger voice around that as we've developed around ending homelessness. So if anyone's up for it, please let me know, Katie.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely will do. So we're nearing the end of the session now, and I guess one of the things that we're going to be reflecting on tomorrow is the theme of building back fairer. And we know that there is a Senedd election that's coming up in May. And I think, you know, we've seen some great examples of leadership over the past year, but for me, the next 2 or 3 years are going to be absolutely critical in terms of building on the efforts that that we've all made during this pandemic, and also delivering the things like the Homelessness Action Group recommendations. So what do you view as the biggest challenges over the next couple of years, and what would your message be to the political leaders who are standing for election, who want to be the next First Minister or the next Housing Minister, and what would you like to see in terms of their leadership over the next couple of years?
Do you want to take this one, Clare? I don't want to steal your thunder.
Oh, Lindsay, you're so kind, thank you. I suppose my big plea to the next government is we've got to get serious about addressing poverty in Wales. I just think that's, you know, some things are not devolved to our country, but many things are, and we have more things under our control than sometimes we think. And I think we've got to address poverty, because if we address poverty, that'll help us to address health inequalities, homelessness. So that would be the biggie for me. And I think some of the things that have been put in place for this next 12 months, which are really fantastic, around extra capital to build more social housing, extra revenue to help us end homelessness, they've got to be continued into the future. We've got to get more money into prevention so that we stop having to spend it on dealing with the crises. I'm done, Lindsay.
Okay, thank you. For me, it's a sort of double-barreled message, really. I think the first is thank you. The first is thank you for listening. That 40% uplift in funding means we can address poverty amongst our staff. Our guys didn't get the nice £500 bonus that we saw some of our social care colleagues get, and that was a bit of a slap in the face. But actually what I can do with that money now is make sure that they've got fair salaries, and that makes a world of difference. I'll be making further announcements about that in due course. But I think that the second biggest challenge for me is that people are still in temporary accommodation. We've said nobody's going to go back out, but we don't have places for them to go. That is a crisis, and it needs to be addressed now.
Absolutely agree. I think there's some very clear messages, and you'll not be surprised to hear that those are echoed in our manifesto that we'll be launching in tomorrow's session. I think the housing supply is massive. I think the support, and I think what we've got from the political decisions over the past couple of months is a new baseline, a new capital baseline, and a new housing support grant baseline. And it's really important that future governments don't go back to where things were before, and they continue to increase and build on those. But Lindsay's absolutely right. The imminent challenge is the numbers that are in temporary accommodation, and what happens when things like the evictions ban and notice periods revert back to how they were before. That's been a fantastic session. I've certainly really enjoyed hearing the reflections from Clare and Lindsay. Thank you for being so open and honest, sharing both the successes and the challenges that you've experienced over the last year. It's really important that we stop and reflect, that we don't just kind of power on into the next crisis, that we think about some of the things that you've touched on today of values and compassion and empowerment of the people that we work alongside, the openness to learn, and the importance of that collaborative approach and listening to each other. So a massive thank you. I know you're both very busy people, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today at our conference. We're going to finish the session now. Just a reminder that there is a free Frontline Network session starting at 12:30. So that's predominantly aimed at frontline staff to share their experiences. We won't ban managers from attending, but we ask that you keep quiet and let frontline staff engage in that session, and that'll be led by our research officer, Gareth, who leads our frontline work. This afternoon, we'll be hearing from a number of people about embedding digital support from Digital Communities Wales, Innovate Trust, and from Llamau about how they've continued to deliver service digitally during the pandemic. And our final session of the day is a really important one, focuses on no recourse to public funds. As we've said earlier today, because of the pandemic, we've been able to provide housing and support to people with no recourse to public funds, but there's real concerns about what happens after the pandemic is over, and we've got to come up with solutions so that we don't leave some of the most vulnerable people left behind. Thank you so much to Clare and Lindsay, and I look forward to seeing the audience again in half an hour. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr iawn.